Okay, welcome back everyone. This is Mr. Cat Eye. In today's report I'm going to be discussing El Chapo, what I believe is a psyop, a deception, and a distraction. Now to begin, I need to set the stage for this discussion by citing and or briefly discussing something from our history of major deceptions involving various groups and agencies that perpetuate such deceptions, in order to familiarize you with an example, a very viable example, of what I think the El Chapo deception represents. Because once again, the same players are involved, and when you get the same three-letter agencies involved in this type of a deception, they pretty much tend to repeat things that they probably presume nobody would notice, but people do notice. I'm one of those people. And so to set the stage for this El Chapo discussion and deception discussion, let me take you in and show you an example of what I think relates directly to the El Chapo deception. So let's get started. Okay, let's see if I can get through this, because a lot of this material is, for me, very reminiscent and brings back memories of another time. And so, to begin with, this example that I'm getting ready to cite, from the perspective of first discussing it ever, was from the persona that many of you have never experienced, which is Max Black. As Max Black was the first on the internet to discuss the idea, the theory, that during the missing years after Colombia, when Obama can't be accounted for, many researchers up to that point, didn't quite understand, and that's how it was an element that said something's not right about this man, Barack Obama, because we can't find, and nobody could substantiate what and where Obama was after Colombia for a number of years. But okay, Max Black postulated the idea after knowing what other people had researched and more or less concluded or failed to conclude, where they said things weren't right. I merely processed that information and one day looked at something, and because it's an observation, I said to myself, I think I know. And while it's a wild theory, most people aren't going to be eager to accept it because they're not going to be able to understand it. Now, it's the understanding the deception that's critical to the motivations. But okay, Max Black threw out on the internet, on a website above top secret, the idea that during the missing years that Obama was missing, he was pretending to be a double for Osama bin Laden. He was a double. Now, let's get beyond the point of whether that's possible or not, and let's discuss the motivations of why, because this makes more sense. Anyone would have asked, well, why would he do such a thing? Because, you see, Osama bin Laden, the real Osama bin Laden, was part of the Saudi family, a big business interest involved with the Bush family, also involved with the CIA at the highest levels. So the real Osama bin Laden, in my mind, would have cooperated in what the CIA would have wanted to do, which is allow the Barack Obama to earn his pay, to get experienced in the field with what would matter much later in his life. And that is, he would dress and become similar to Osama bin Laden. And why? Because he could not only pass intelligence to various groups to help them, to prove to them that he was somebody who actually mattered, he could provide arms deals and or provide funds to groups that would later become the enemies of tomorrow. Okay? He was funding and arming the enemies of tomorrow, pretty much what many people think he's still doing today. But okay, the conspiracy was that that there was a real Osama bin Laden and that there was a fake Osama bin Laden. Now the fake one was Obama, who did what I just basically said. And I'm sure there's a multitude of other things he could have done, because being an agent of the CIA, you got to understand, he's only pretending to be Osama bin Laden. And by being able to control those around him as someone important, all powerful, he would have had people who would have done his talking for him. Okay? I mean, you wouldn't have approached Osama bin Laden just as an average person and said, hey, buddy, let's chit-chat. No, it wouldn't have happened that way. And so in this controlled environment, Obama could play a role of being Osama bin Laden and doing these things behind the scenes. Now, when the real Osama bin Laden died, because you got to understand, see, I believe, Osama bin Laden was thrown to the wolves by this New World Order group, because after 9/11, if you recall, they blamed it on Osama bin Laden. Now, whether he was to take the responsibility to kind of like once again act as a distraction from the truth didn't matter, because when he died, that's when these other fake Osama bin Ladens were perpetuated by the CIA, and they were terrible. I mean, you can look at those images, but the fact that the CIA was saying that this is Osama bin Laden making these latest threats, oh, we better do this and we better do that, it was part of the deception. Because you see, once Obama's role was done, he reverted back to America to become the community activist who goes on to get into politics and who eventually becomes president of the United States. As if anybody really believes that he did that all on his own effort, because he didn't. And so anyway, this conspiracy of a double served a very critical role to the CIA and to elements within the government. And it served both sides, probably the Saudi family and those interests that were of mutual likeness with regard to the West and whatever was going on over in the Middle East. And so Osama served a very key role in that regard. But okay, I really wanted, and I knew I'd get reminiscent of too many things, because there's a lot to this conspiracy that's valid. And now when people did analysis of the hands, now, it didn't take long for this idea to catch fire. Many people did their own little analysis and said, there may be something to this. While everyone focused more or less, the small minds always focused on the how. And the how was simple. You get someone of similar features, height, and things that work, and then with makeup, long hair, and all the proper accoutrements, the look, the turban, the fatigue jacket and things of that nature. But people did an analysis on the hands and found things that more or less said, this is Osama bin Laden is actually Barack Obama. Now, this does not mean in any way that the real Osama bin Laden looked like this, because he didn't. He looked similar to this. But okay. The why is the more critical part, because that's where the three-letter agency comes in, because if they're going to do this kind of a double of someone who's very notable, powerful within the Islam groups, then they had to be very careful how they do that. So it had to be controlled, and many things had to be controlled at the highest levels. But okay, all that aside, I cite this example of a major hoax involving someone notable, who everyone wanted to get, who was hunting and who had millions of dollars reward bounty, leading to, the arrest or the death of Osama bin Laden. Okay, now, the fact that Obama later in life would claim that he killed Osama bin Laden, and anyone knows that was a fake, that's not true, because the real Osama bin Laden had already died. And so what had been perpetuated along the time frame from his death were these fakes, the ones that, some had red beards and white beards and black beards, and they looked as phony, they looked like clowns. But the mere fact that the CIA was saying that this was Osama bin Laden, no one ever questioned it. I mean, as if everyone is too stupid to notice that those Osama bin Ladens that the CIA claimed was Osama bin Laden wasn't the real Osama bin Laden. Okay? It was just a fake to perpetuate that hoax that Obama had since retracted from, gone back to America, and become what he is today. Now, I cite this example of the CIA doing this, okay, and you can get into your own research as to why and all this other stuff, because it is part of history, okay, but it's in our face because, see, Obama was doing back then, well, like I said, he was arming and funding the enemies of tomorrow, and many people still think he is. Now, which means he trained himself very well for that role. If anything, that must be the mindset, okay? But anyway, I cite this example before I go into the El Chapo discussion because I want you to see that there is a viable CIA hoax involving notable figures who are still in play today in America and who are still involved with ISIS, the major terrorist threat today, the CIA construct, okay, their little army of henchmen that go do what they want them to do. And so, once again, we got the same players involved. Now, let me transition to the El Chapo discussion, and you'll understand how all this is very similar, and then I'll explain the El Chapo deception, because it's going to take a little bit of discussion in some areas that you may not have ever considered, but you need to, because that's what makes the understanding so much better. But okay, let's go to the El Chapo part. Okay, El Chapo Guzman. To begin with, let me remind you that on January the 2nd, the Oregon standoff began. On January the 8th, we hear of the recapture of El Chapo Guzman. Becomes one of these mission accomplished for Mexico for having captured one of the most notorious and most wanted drug traffickers in the world. Now, that's what they claim. But, okay, in order to understand this, you need to understand that shortly after the media picked up on his recapture, they focused their attention on the recapture. As soon as the El Chapo recapture hit the media, it became the media focus. And then that focus was stretched and elaborated on by the major networks. With regard to Mexico, I think it was the Mexican Attorney General claiming that it was Sean Penn who helped lead them to capturing El Chapo. Now that began a series of threats and things, you know, because, I mean, of course, you got to understand the state government, or the government of Mexico, is helping spread the deception. Why? Well, this is why I need to explain some of the players here and understand, because once you understand why people do what they're doing, you'll understand why Mexico wanted to draw attention away from the deception by involving Sean Penn, who really had nothing to do with El Chapo's recapture. Now, they're using him not only to draw attention away, but it's more distraction from the truth. Now, to understand this bigger operational deception, let's go back all the way to what we know about El Chapo Guzman. That in 1993, he was thrown in prison in Jalisco, Mexico, state prison, for 20 years for charges of murder and drug trafficking. Now, that was 1993. And this image is from the 1993 imprisonment. Now, fearing extradition many years later and along the way, he feared extradition, and the story goes $250 million was paid to prison officials and guards to allow him to escape. Now, in the underworld where the rabbit hole goes, there are some people who believe that $250 million in bribes was paid for by the CIA. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. Upon his escape, now he escaped in January 19th. Damn, where have I seen that lately? January 19th, he escapes. 2001. Sometime in 2013, because he has a 13-year reign running around, he's on the run for 13 years. Now, in 2013, story goes that his most inner security circle was breached, penetrated, and was used through confessions and testimony and wiretaps and surveillance and all kinds of things. And of course, there's one group that's trying to build a case against him. Okay, now he gets captured in February 22nd, 2014. And these are the images from, this is an image in 1993 of this person called El Chapo Guzman. And these two images are 13 years removed from this image, because he was on the run for 13 years. Now, in those 13 years, he became a cult mythical legend among Mexicans and the drug world, because he was wanted by everyone. They had millions of dollars reward out for his arrest. Of course, he's hobnobbing with all kinds of people in the finest places with the finest people, and build himself into a legend during this time frame that he escaped from 2001 until he was captured in 2014. Now, the person who did all of this supposedly is this person here, who many of you will think that that's El Chapo Guzman, but no, this is a double. Now follow with me here. He gets captured in 2014. Now, he then makes it all the way through July the 11th, 2015. That's as long as he's in prison before he escapes in a tunnel that he only had to pay $5 million for someone to dig. That's the estimated cost, and I checked it, and it happened to be exactly 1.5 kilometers long. And yes, for $5 million, I think he got a deal. But that's why many people who will realize, damn, $250 million to the prison officials, something's not right with that. But okay. He escapes, he stays on the run, and sometime in October of 2015, he meets with Sean Penn and some other people for part of this Rolling Stone interview that Sean Penn did. And if you haven't seen it already, I would encourage you to do so. What Sean Penn didn't realize is that the El Chapo Guzman that he was meeting was in fact the Guzman who would get captured just very shortly thereafter, who's the same Guzman who was captured in February 2014. But that's as far as it goes, because these El Chapos are not the real El Chapo. Now, bear with me here. Once again, this whole effort stemmed from his fear of extradition. Now think about it. If he were to be extradited, now at this time he was heavily into the drug world, and most likely with the CIA. So he knows people, he knows things, not only from those he's dealing with on the United States side, but from all of those people that he's dealing with on the Mexican side. Intelligence networks from both sides, political parties and political thieves, corrupt types from both sides, okay, is who he has to deal with. Now, it stands to reason that, to me at least, that when he escaped in 2001, January 19th, for $250 million, that people say he didn't pay, the CIA paid. This is when efforts began in this operation to do what's happened. And so that's why we have to go back to the start. Because from the time he escaped, he started building through this person, the persona. Somewhere along the line, the doubles come into play. And they're the ones that live the good lifestyle. And so this double first of all, has the power of El Chapo, has all the contacts, has wealth available to him. Why? Because he's there, because he is, in fact, a deep cover for the El Chapo CIA side that needs a double to be in place when the extradition takes place. He will be extradited, this El Chapo who matches this El Chapo from the previous arrest. That's how everyone said, well, that's El Chapo. But these two El Chapos aren't this El Chapo. So the one that's going to get extradited to the United States of America isn't the real El Chapo. No, he's a construct, but he's a willing player in this game, because he literally, and I'm sure for what they're paying him or his family, he would have needed all kinds of assurances well before the kickoff of this deception to ensure that, his role is to be El Chapo and to be sacrificed. And I contend that the first capture was promulgated most likely by the CIA and with El Chapo's approval, using this double to, of course, they're going to kill the bodyguards. They got to make it look real. But the whole time the bodyguards are involved in a firefight, El Chapo doubles are always escaping. And they always escape because, of course, they always gain the respect of being El Chapo. Even in prison, he may be a double, but he has all the numbers and can do anything and anything to anybody he wants, because he is in effect El Chapo. But he isn't as far as it relates to the drug cartel business. You see, when he escaped in January of 2001, he immediately reorganized his cartel. Turned it into, apparently, with the stories where you hear that he was making over $1 billion a year. Now, he was clearing $3 or $4 billion and getting to keep $1 or $1.5 billion of what he was producing. So those other, if he's producing $4 billion, he's only keeping $3 billion's going to somebody else. Now, who could that be? A 3-letter agency comes to mind. Damn, starts with a C, ends with an A. You can figure it out. But okay, it's big business. And for the key player, like I said, to be involved on both sides of politics from both sides of the border means that when the Mexican state attorney general tried to pin the blame on Sean Penn, they were in essence playing their part as the government who's involved with the CIA and Mexican intelligence in helping sell the deception. Now, they don't even have to explain to these people it's in their best interest to help sell the deception, because they're the corrupt politicians on the inside on both sides of the border. Both intelligence networks are involved. It's not just the CIA. So this is a big, big operation. And fearing extradition, you see, there are elements that are hunting El Chapo, and now that he's been captured, they're working on his extradition to the United States. Now, when he gets to the United States as El Chapo, they think that by cutting him off from all of his communications and all of the things that a person would need to maintain an empire, a global enterprise, he's providing most of the heroin to the world. Okay, this is a big business. But okay, it's a big deception too, because knowing as far back as 2001 that extradition would pose a problem because the real El Chapo Guzman is most likely involved with the CIA and with Mexican intelligence and politicians on both sides. And so it's in his best interest and everyone else's best interest, so everyone has to kind of go along, because that's what people with billions of dollars do. They pay people to go along with them. Okay? Now, but as long as you understand, from the time he escaped, he reorganized his cartel, and this was all done under the auspices of the CIA, because the CIA was helping. They put him in place and then helped him get out by the story that they're the ones that fronted the money, the $250 million, telling him, you can pay us back. And of course, I'm sure he has. Now, the real El Chapo Guzman, I don't believe is in custody. The double is in custody. And the reason it had to be staged this way, from the initial arrest in February 2014, that was a setup from supposedly the penetration of his inner security circle in 2013 that led to this capture in 2014, only kept him in jail long enough for this tunnel to allow him to escape. And once again, if he's a double, he knows that everyone, to include himself, he's a willing participant in this deception, this El Chapo, the double. Okay? He's the double, and he's a willing participant. Now, he knows the deal, and he's playing his role. But what the government doesn't know on the U.S. side is that when they extradite him, they're not really getting the real El Chapo. They're getting the double. Now, I don't know how anybody's going to prove it, because you see, if they took DNA and fingerprints and all this shit right up in here, they're going to match, exactly what this guy is. But from here to here, the switch was made. And that switch was made because we're now at a stage where this drug industry, being run by these three-letter agencies, are dependent on these billions and billions of dollars to do many things. And so to think that their main man would be actually arrested and extradited poses a threat to both sides of the border, intelligence networks and politicians. And so it's not going to happen. So isn't it easier to just pay everyone to go along to get along? And so the Mexican government does their part by blaming Sean Penn. Sean Penn has to go on 60 Minutes and discuss, how, and he's sincere. And I know he's not lying. He was used in October. And when you hear the stories of a 7-hour ride and 5-hour flight, and that they couldn't take off until certain satellites were not available. And so, so all of that was being orchestrated by the double. This double is who met Sean Penn. But for all practical purposes, this double is, in a way, El Chapo. It's who has become El Chapo. If there's going to be an El Chapo in prison, it's going to be this double. And so for the fact that the United States thinks that they have the real El Chapo, well, you see, one part of the government, the corrupt side of the government, will leave it alone. They'll pretend like he is and go nowhere with any investigation. But then there may be the other side that's actually trying to solve cases and things and trying to actually do research. And so they're going to learn that he probably has very limited grasp of certain things relative to the cartel that he supposedly runs. Why? Because he's just a front man. Phone numbers and people, names, and that's how, because in prison, I'm sure he doesn't have his cell phone with him, and let me look at my contact list, and I need an attorney in Miami and Las Vegas, what politicians? No, all this is either here or merely people that he calls. He calls people. He needs money, he tells somebody. Okay? Why? Because he's the front man taking all the risks, and they're going to do for him like he's El Chapo or else. Now, the or else, who's going to believe him if he were to come forward and say, I'm not really the El Chapo? Oh, really? Well, you've been imprisoned and all these pictures, and yeah, that's right, because it's all him. So nobody would want to believe him even if he told the truth and said, I'm not really El Chapo. No one's going to believe it. Because this deception began way back here when it was dreamed up between 1993 and 2001 when extradition is what motivated supposedly this escape and what motivated paying $250 million to prison officials and security to put him in a laundry basket and wheel him out. Think about that. But anyway, now that I've mentioned this, you see, this deception it has some key dates involved in here, but it was, you see, the Oregon standoff and the El Chapo operation here in a way, overlapping operations where one sort of benefits the other, or where one can use the event to help benefit another event that's going on. And how did this work? January 2nd, Oregon standoff began. January 8th, El Chapo Guzman captures the headlines and the media. Once again, the media was preoccupied with El Chapo, and then they milked it until it became a Sean Penn thing. And I really feel sorry for Sean Penn, because I know he got screwed. He got hoaxed, okay? But the hoax is real good. It's like one of these demonic magicians. How in the hell did that work? That's where we're at here. We're dealing with a very severe deception going on before us. And the deception is that the El Chapo that's in custody, who's pictured with Sean Penn in an interview, whose prison photos from his previous captures show this to be the same person, it's the El Chapo double. The real El Chapo hasn't really been seen officially since 2001, when he escaped. Now, this overlapping between one operation to the other is a little complex, because one was used as a distraction, because, like I said, the Oregon standoff was delayed. Why? Of course, everyone's attention has been everywhere else, and they needed all kinds of little things to explain away the FBI delay. But now that today's January 23rd, 200 vehicles showed up, and they're obviously getting ready to do something. But isn't it amazing? It happened on the 23rd, and it all began on the 19th, especially the 20th, right after that ancient artifacts video that kind of signaled you can go ahead and proceed with the rest of this operational plan, because it's proceeding ahead just like I suspected. And that's why it's a shame that people can't see what the hell's going on. But okay, this El Chapo Guzman double trouble is a serious element for them, the CIA, and the politicians on both sides of the border, both intelligence agencies, both political parties. This El Chapo was needed and was staged at a time when it helped draw attention away from the Oregon standoff. And now that El Chapo Guzman has come and gone, mission accomplished, most people have forgot about him. But in the process, see, one draws attention from the other, and the other draws attention. You see, they both serve each other to draw away from the truth. The truth being that the Oregon standoff isn't real, not as real as we would like it to be, and neither is the El Chapo Guzman real, the one that supposedly got recaptured. Now, if you follow that, I hope you do, because it's a serious deception. It's a good one. Runs deep, involves many, many groups and elements, and so all I can do is share it, tell you the way I see it, because that's how I see it. And now I've explained why. Thank you for watching. Thank you for considering. Until next time, have a good night.